Herzlich willkommen zum Africa für Einmanns podcast and a very warm welcome to our English-speaking audience. As you know, this format is bilingual, also Deutsch, English, English-Deutsch, but we keep it predominantly for these conversations here in English, and we are back with another exciting episode. Chandre, maybe as a quick introduction, who do we have with us today and what's going to be our topic?
This was speaking to a very prolific guest this morning. It's Mr. John Steytler, but I won't do the introduction. I'll ask him to really introduce him. Good morning, Mr. Steytler. Welcome to the Africa for Almonds podcast. Just tell us a little bit more about yourself, your history, where do you come from, and where you look forward going to.
Thank you, Simply. Sometimes I wonder about my own history, and I said, wow, where could my story be possible? I was born in a place called Spookiesdorp in Commersdal, Dusty Street. And I ended up becoming an advisor to the president. But what makes me proud is that I'm born Namibian. I grew up in a humble place. I played soccer in the dusty streets of Spookiesdorp. Some of the people that you may know that also lived in the same street as myself, including Cameroon, who became the coach of the Brave Warriors, Jerry Zimba, who also became the coach of the Junior Brave Warriors, and we also had people like Mike Kim and also people like Denzel Bruver. It was tough. It was not always easy. I went to school in Namibia. My first degree I did at the University of Namibia. I was then very lucky that I got an opportunity to go and study in Germany. I must also say, initially I wanted to study psychology, so I did a degree, up to honors degree in psychology. But then after seeing the challenges in Namibia, just after independence, I realized at that point in time, and I've changed my mind now, at that point in time, psychology was not the most important thing. The most important thing was to come up with economic solutions. And when I got the opportunity to go study economics in Germany, I just grabbed it. I did a basic degree in economics in Germany and my master's degree in macroeconomics in Germany. Came back and I just felt this urge to continue to study. So while I was working with government, Ministry of Trade, later the Central Bank, I kept on studying. I did a degree at the University of London, and I still felt this wasn't enough. I need also do at least a PhD. And I also did a bit of business studies, so I also studied at the University of Witwatersrand in South Africa. I think this is more about my educational achievements, but what has been the accolade for me so far was that at some point I was fortunate enough to start a statistical agency in Namibia, an independent statistical agency, the NSA. And that really changed my focus from economics into statistics. In particular, I was always fascinated with economic statistics, interest rates, inflation, this. But over time, I've realized at the center of development is actually the demography, the people.
Yes.
And if we can understand the composition of the Namibian population and play around the people, instead of planning around inflation and around interest rates, but play around that Namibians are, especially the most vulnerable, then we stand maybe a good chance of developing as a nation. I've also concluded, and it's very important for me, that Namibia is the greatest asset that Namibia is. Like as any country, but the greatest asset that Namibia is not these fisheries, it's not the minerals, it's not the green hydrogen that we will harvest. It's not the oil and gas that have been discovered, but it's the Namibian people. Like if we don't develop that asset, we can forget about development. So what has fascinated me in recent times is actually more demographics and statistics than economics, although I was trained as an economist. In particular, I did my PhD in financial economics, and I did a master's in financial economics. But you can see there's a massive paradigm shift in my thinking, that we have to put people at the center of development. If we don't put people at the center of development, we can forget about development. Sure. So I don't even want to speak about economics.
Yes.
I speak about development.
Yes, on a people basis.
On a people basis.
You are coined by some as the architect of the President's Harambee Prosperity Plan. During his first term, you served as his senior economic advisor. Can you speak to us a little bit more about the HPP, the Harambee Prosperity Plan, specifically HPP 1, which I think you had more input in, and how you've used these values of placing people at the center of development to be able to come up with that plan?
Sure. Firstly, maybe I was clarified. I was not the architect. I was part of a team. Okay. I was then the economic advisor to the president. And the way the Harambee Prosperity Plan started was actually amazing. It didn't start as a fully fledged plan. It actually started, we thought of energy, because in South Africa, they started to have this, what they call load sharing and blackouts. And I recall in one meeting, President said, "John, during my tenure, I don't want to see blackouts. So let's do something with energy." But as we started to discuss back and forth with the president, with the other advisors, we realized, look, we need to have something bigger. And one of the key things that became then very important, two things that became even more important than energy was that we have to look at governance, effective governance. We say that without effective governance, economic development is just not possible. So it's a precondition. So what we say with effective governance is that we need to have actually to fight corruption. And here the president was very clear. He actually came up with what he used to term a formula. We said the one way to promote a clean government is through transparency and accountability. So later is when COVID came and Harambee 2 was developed, we built on transparency. And I recall in one of the discussions somebody said, transparency is like a sanitizer. You cook things in the dark. This is where corruption can happen. Yeah. But when you sanitize, it opens up things. And then through that transparency is where you can promote effective governance. But it must go also hand in hand with accountability. It's one thing to say that, Chambray, you are corrupt, that the evidence is there, and then we don't hold you accountable. And you just keep on walking as if nothing has happened. Yeah. So it's transparency plus accountability that will promote good governance. So the next chapter that we then looked at was the economic chapter, but where we actually, the idea was to look at transformation of the economy from two perspectives. Transformation from a perspective that we need to diversify the economy, but also transformation from the perspective that we have to broaden the participation of the people that participate in the economy. In other words, promote inclusivity. Because we then said the economy has grown in the past and we've seen good growth rates, but it was not inclusive. So many people until today are still excluded from reaping the benefits of this economic growth.
And maybe just there, because as a curious young German, and I think many of our audience do the same, when they engage with Namibia, they look up for example, which challenges are facing the Namibian population in the sense of maybe their prosperity and stuff. I would just be curious, because you have such a diverse experience there among the different topics, being it maybe corruption, being it maybe wealth inequality or unemployment. Where do you see the biggest challenge for the people in Namibia these days?
Without a doubt, I see three big challenges for us. And that was also captured in the Harambee Prosperity Plan. Number one is education. We have invested in education, but we have not invested in quality education and therefore quality outcomes. And therefore in the Harambee Prosperity Plan, we have also said we need to diversify. So education is not just theoretical knowledge, but we must also promote and appreciate people that can work with their hands, the artisans. We have cited often during the publicization of Harambee, the president often cited even a case like Germany. He said Germany was not built by by people with doctorates.
No.
It was built with people that could work with their hands.
Handwerker.
Handwerker, genau. And so that's one that we have to continue, and we have to destigmatize the importance of vocational training, because vocational training is seen as for people that have not succeeded. And then they say, it's better if you go and work with your hands. So the other one that's very important for me is the health sector. And that one also came up in the Harambed Prosperity Plan. We said, a mother that dies during the birth process, or a child, is one mother too many. So we need to really focus on the first 1,000 days of a child. Because with infant mortality, there's two classifications. You can deliver a baby, but then the baby dies 100 days later or 10 days later. And it's not seen as infant mortality. But we need to understand that the first 1,000 days is crucial for the development, the cognitive development of children. And so therefore we have to invest more in education, but in health, but linked to health is in particular sanitation. Because you find maybe a child is born in a hospital, but then the child goes to a place where there's no proper sanitation. And as you can imagine, what are the prospects of that child? And there's no proper nutrition. In Namibia, sadly, and really it hurts me, is that we see that the latest statistics that we have is that about 30% of Namibian children are stunted. So what does that mean? It means that when you're stunted, your educational outcomes are so poor and that you get dragged into generational poverty. So therefore I advocate more investment in health and in education and in sanitation. And even before we come to housing. And housing is also very important.
But this could be a leading result of a better education. I mean, if one obtains a good career, maybe in a handicraft or in the academic field, maybe he's also more capable of forming wealth and accumulating other things, right?
Absolutely, because we have evidence, statistical evidence that shows that if you have better education, then the probability of getting a job is higher. So therefore we need to train people, and with that also use that as a sales pitch to the international community to say, come invest in Namibia because we have skilled people. Yeah. We don't need PhDs, but we need people that can put a computer to
yes.
So that's one. But at the same time, our unemployment rate is also so high, and we cannot forget that there are people, they don't have the skills.
But is it really the unemployment rate? Because, I mean, just our example of yesterday, we were driving back from Swakop and made a few stops here and there and bought some mushrooms on the side. And there was a lot of, from my notice, farmers or even small handicraftsmen who seemed to be engaged in the informal sector and who I was not sure, are they actually counted as unemployed or are they part of the informal sector? And if so, how do you get these people to engage in the economy? Because I guess you can make as many skilled labor jobs as you want, but if these vacancies are not filled by people also from the informal sector, then there will be no shift.
Yeah, in fact, the current definition of employment, it also includes the informal sector. So the informal sector contributes a lot because employment is whether you do something. It's not whether you're formal or informal, but the challenge with the informal sector is that the rights of the workers are not protected. Yeah. The incomes they get are so
unstable.
It's unstable. It's so low and unstable, and they can be pushed. Like you mentioned, the example of the mushrooms. Okay, the mushrooms were there now because it rained.
Yeah.
But you come back 2 months later, there are no mushrooms there, and so people. They get income from there, but it's a very low income. It's what we, in labor statistics, we speak also of decent employment. So now people they survive in the informal sector. It's like a survival economy. But you can imagine what happened, for example, during COVID. It was very sad what happened. You will recall, Chandra, that some of the people in the informal sector that are selling fruit and veggies, They couldn't sell it. So Steytler lost the income. And then from overnight, they were falling into poverty. And then to get out of that poverty again is very difficult. So we need to find a way that we have like social safety networks that if you lose your income, I think in Germany,
I was going to say,
you at least get some sort of
Hartz IV or something. I mean, Arbeitslosengeld. We have some. Is there something similar in Namibia? I mean,
unfortunately, not yet. There are plans that we have a social security commission, so there are plans that in over time, if this body is properly capitalized, that if people lose their jobs, they will at least get some sort of support. Currently, the support is only for maternity, but it's also not covered for I believe in Germany it's sometimes covered for up to 2 years.
Up to 2 years.
A support of 3 months, and then you don't get your full salary in this.
For 17,000
years. So these are systems that we have to continue to develop. The good thing is that the plans are there and the ideas are in the right direction. But our economy is just not matured enough yet. And we have to grow what I will call the middle class.
Yeah.
So now the question is, what is the middle class in Namibia? I've pondered about it recently, and I don't have the answer, but I just want to push it out here. How much money must you make in Namibia to be considered middle class?
I think about 20 to 30,000
after tax or before tax?
After tax.
After tax.
Okay, so now look at it from this perspective. If you're the middle class, the first thing you should be able to afford a mortgage pay.
Yes.
Okay. If you can't, you should be able to afford a decent rent.
Yeah.
You should not be renting a shack.
Yes.
Okay, so now you look at mortgage payment or it's equivalent. Okay. Then if you're in the middle class, you should be able to have transport.
Yeah.
So now if you're in Germany, you might not need, it's not a big need because you have proper public transport.
Yes.
But in Namibia, you will need maybe a small car,
Yeah.
not a big car.
Yeah.
So you pay for it, how much you pay a month. In the middle class, if you're in your house, obviously you need internet connectivity. You need maybe a TV, you need a microwave, a fridge. How much does it cost? Then if you're in the middle class, you should be able to eat out at least every now and then, not every night.
Yeah.
So now, if you add those figures together, how much do you think you will need in Namibia to be in the middle class? I don't have the answer,
So, yeah.
but I'm just pushing it out there. So our middle class is very, very small.
Very small.
Very small.
Would you say the upper middle class relatively is comparable to Western countries like Germany? That just the middle class and the, let's say, working class or unemployment, that is different in the share of the economy?
Well, one index that I look at is the United Nations Development Index. So it shows there's some people in Namibia, they have the same living standard as people in Denmark or in Sweden, which is even higher than in Germany.
Of course, significantly.
More or less there. And then you have some people, they are very, very low on the development index. So in Namibia, we have a huge problem with disparities. It's not only income disparities, it's wealth disparities, it's disparities of opportunities. And I think we don't look much at the opportunity disparity, but the opportunity to be networked, the opportunity to go to school. It makes a huge difference. And that's why I like when we look at poverty, I don't like the $1 a day poverty. I like the multi-dimensional poverty index. Different dimensions of poverty. Whether you're going to school and you finish school, that's a dimension of poverty. So we must look at poverty from different perspectives if we want to resolve the poverty issue. We cannot just say the World Bank says it's $2 a day. Now we give $2 a day to people. We solve poverty. But you think they will not be poverty?
Interesting.
I want to get in on that. I think a large argument normally of colloquial economists, especially when it comes to this issue of inequality and the fact that we have such a high Gini coefficient in Namibia, is this idea that restorative justice does need some form of return of land, productive land, to the majority population. And this has been a thorn in our flesh, not only here in Namibia, but also in South Africa. From your perspective, how do we really deal with this grave inequality that was started and exaggerated by years of colonialism and apartheid policies, without this fear that people normally have around, well, we'll shape the markets, we'll chase away investors, property rights must be protected, because this is a thorn in the flesh of even the relationship between Germany.
I mean, it's something we have been confronted with all the people we spoke about, Germany, in Sparkop and other places.
So I just want to hear from your side, like, how do we sustainably deal with this matter?
This is, my goodness, I will need another
Maybe, I was going to say.
What I can say is that we have to put the land issue. We have to address it. If not, I believe, as an economist, and I will not stick to the land issue, but in economics you can plan what we call a soft landing. And we have an opportunity to engineer soft landing. But if we don't use that opportunity to engineer soft landing, there will be a disruptive unwinding of the land issue. We must avoid it.
Maybe because this is something I was going to address with you too in the second half when we talk a bit more about Germany and now also the new economic relationship. But for the moment, thank you very much for these first insights, and see you guys soon after the break.
Mit uns bist du on air. Pool Podcast Agency. Deine Stimme in der Welt.
Welcome back, guys, to the second half of this economic conversation. And I think now to dive into a bit the differences and connections between Germany and Namibia, maybe Chandra, for some background, it's interesting because I think our friendship to some extent represents also very well the differences and even the overlines between both countries. Because, you know, I mean, I grew up was very fortunate as a single child with two full working parents in Germany in the upper middle class. And you, to some extent, I mean, do you want to introduce it yourself, or your economic background is to some extent, of course, a much more different one, right? As an orphan in outside of the big cities of Namibia. And I think that is also to some extent maybe even representative, right? Like, is maybe our friendship, how to say, a metaphor for the economic relation that we have between Germany and Namibia? And where do you, for example, see, since knowing me, where do you see the differences in the economic development between both countries?
No, definitely. I think it's a privilege to meet a privileged friend. We'll put it that way. But yeah, definitely. I mean, I grew up in Utrecht, as you know. I grew up without my mom. Basically, she's still alive, and my father passed on in the very early ages, and that really exposed me as well to the economic struggles that any normal Namibian could have. I mean, I went through school at a stage where we were just transitioning to free education. So I had to, for instance, start a school newspaper when I was grade 9 to be able to pay for myself and a group of other orphans school development fees, because that was still a requirement in that. And I think that leads me to the next question, John. There's a new frontier that everyone's talking about. The two governments are still busy finalizing the details of the negotiations on the genocide issue, which is a thorn in the flesh of the relationship. But now also with Germany's energy insecurity, we've moved into this frontier of green hydrogen and looking at more economic opportunities. Would you say that there is equity in the relationship between Germany and Namibia?
Or is it in the making, at least?
Yes.
Someday it's difficult for me. I will maybe just answer it broadly, not specifically to Namibia. But if you look at equity between developed economies and developing nations, is there equity? Let me shift focus away from Namibia and Germany, for example. Let's just look at the United Nations. So at the United Nations, we've not seen a single report. Let's say it's an old club that reflects the reality of post Second World War. We have few countries that come together and they determine. It's the same. I've worked at a World Bank, at the IMF. I've sat at the executive board. And I can tell you, the world has changed so much, but Europe still dominates the decisions of the IMF, together with America.
Yeah.
Even China, with all its might, that has grown so much, they have a secondary role at the IMF. And the IMF decides so much what's happening in the world. The US and Europe, for example, they have an agreement that the president of the World Bank must always be an American. The MD of the IMF must always be a European. You can be the best African that you can be, or the Chinese that you can be, but you can never go to the top. And that you find that developing countries, they always just, we don't even sit at the table. We have to be just happy with it.
So how do we rebalance this? How do we solve that problem?
I think that the SDGs and Agenda 2030 gives us an opportunity. Let me just explain briefly the difference between the MDGs and the SDGs, and why I like the SDGs so much. The MDGs there were 8 goals. It was for developing countries like Namibia. But some people have realized that we are in it together. We had the climate accord separately, and then in 2015 we got the climate action and the SDGs together in Agenda 2030. And one of the key messages of the SDGs is to say that these SDGs are applicable for all nations. So it means now nations must be very truthful and say that this is not just Africa's problem, this is our problem. And similarly, Africa must say, when it comes to climate change, this is not just a European problem because they contributed, and the Americans most, to the carbon emissions. It's also going to affect us. So we're in it together. And the SDGs are also interconnected. We must also realize that you cannot solve poverty, for example, if we don't take climate action, and vice versa. So it gives us an opportunity to say that we're in it together. But we must also not fool ourselves.
I mean, are we in it together? Is it going to be self-sustainability of energy for Namibia, or is it maybe just the export of green energy to Germany, who now lack them? I mean, it's going to be to see if it's inclusive in the sense of Namibian energy sufficiency, for example. It's just as an example, right? I mean, it's still not sure how that energy will go and who benefits the most from it, right?
Yes, it's not sure, but I think it's here. What I understand is there are still negotiations between the Namibian government and one German company in particular. But in future, it will not just be green energy for Germany or for Europe, but I think the idea is also that other companies will come in and Namibia will be developed as a green energy hub. So for me, what will be more important will not be actually the needs of Germany, but it will be the stance that the Namibian policymakers will take and say that, look, this resource, it must benefit all Namibians. We must come up with what I call an inclusive economic recovery, economic development plan that should not only be anchored on green hydrogen, but even if green hydrogen becomes an anchor, the overarching principle should still be inclusiveness. When we plan, and as Namibians know that when we plan, we say we plan with having in mind the most vulnerable person.
Yes.
And so that's going to be very critical. And secondly, very
But are these conversations really held at that level? I always have this perception that apart from the policymakers, but perhaps the technocrats behind the policymakers always have this mantra of while we should make certain concessions to the investors because they are the ones that does the capital injection and all the surrounding networks that come with that. And the priority is always how do we get this deal as fast as possible, as efficiently as possible, and not necessarily how do we get the most out of it.
Yeah, obviously there's competitiveness in attracting foreign direct investment. But we must also learn from mistakes of the past.
Yeah.
That FDI is not the silver bullet of our problem, panacea. So we need, and I hope the technocrats, they look at it, but over and above the technocrats, what I'm advocating for is that when we speak of inclusive planning should not only be confined to the technocrats and the politicians, but we must also involve civil society.
Yeah.
And so that's very important, that we must get civil society on board. And that's also one of the principles of Agenda 2030. It's also one of the principles of Agenda 2060 of the AU, when we say that Africa we want. The Africa we want is not an Africa and is planned by technocrats. Even if you look at the EGRN that Namibia recently conducted, the African Union was very clear that there must be representatives of civil society on the panel. And we've seen there were representatives of civil society on the panel. But what's also important is that if we put representatives of civil society on panels, it should not be there just to showcase or for window dressing. We must actually also listen to what he says. They should contribute concerns and make contribute meaningfully.
There's always this concern, right, with big projects like this. I mean, we've discovered oil, we have green hydrogen, I mean, there are various other plans to structure the economy in such a way that it works for everyone. The concern of elite capture. And I mean, even across those stakeholders, you would find that even in civil society, smaller civil society groups might not find place at the table, but you find the ones that are bundle-based, that have big budgets, that have access and mobility in terms of policymakers, business, and so on. How do we avoid, in more direct terms, elite capture of these potential development projects in Namibia?
Yes, I just want to go back to, and I'd like to cite the president because I think he has something here, and if we do it properly, that could be one of the ways. So I refer to one of the transparency plus accountability we lead to good governance. But here's also something else that he refers to on processes, systems, and institutions. And right now, I believe the Namibian institutions are quite credible, in particular the judiciary. The judiciary is maybe sometimes overloaded because they don't have enough capacity to deal with cases quickly. But where we have to focus more at the beginning is at the process. If the process is initiated with corruption in mind, then it will end up with corruption. If you write an expression of interest with a view that Chandra should get, then
okay, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, you mean, basically.
Then it will come. So we have to we have to pay a lot of attention on the process and the origination of the process. And then follow through with the systems. And then ensure that our institutions are truly independent and also well capacitated. For example, one institution that has made a lot of noise in the past is the Anti-Corruption Commission, which is good. But the Anti-Corruption Commission, they claim they don't have capacity. Because they don't have forensic auditors, for example. They can't afford it. The Anti-Corruption Commission says we don't get sufficient budgets to be able, because the private people, they tend to be a step ahead of the public sector. Because they are able to attract the smartest people. They are able to remunerate them, and you see always like this movement from public sector to private sector. So we need to find also here one key thing is also the topic of what we call civil service reform. That has been on the table for a long time. So civil service reform is a bit misunderstood in the case of Namibia. I think when we hear civil service reform, people think job cuts, layoffs. But the idea is not to have job cuts. The idea is to build a civil service that's smart, that's top, that's efficient, that has the best talent, and that can be equal to the technocrats in the private sector. If we don't do that, then from outside, people will smart.
But is it not also a bit structural? I mean, we talked about it in the case of Germany. It's a very industrial country, right? We have comparatively the largest industrial base even within Europe. And from what I see in Namibia, at least, I mean, you have all these extractive forms of economy. You have the mining, you have the fishing, you have uranium. Now, maybe to some extent, green hydrogen. Isn't it to some extent? I mean, we know many cases of the so-called Dutch disease. Even isn't it to some extent inevitable that this easiness of elite capture takes place in economies where it's so extractive? And I don't know, the solution, maybe Chantal, you also said it the other day, it could be that at least through green hydrogen versus all the past ones, or even the new oil reserves which were found, at least in green hydrogen, there would be a large demand of skilled labor, right? That would be at least bringing much more people into the participation of these resources, other than maybe in the other industries. Is that not maybe the way out of this so-called extractive trap? And couldn't it be maybe leading to young people? I don't know, Chantal, maybe you can say it. Wouldn't it lead to you now, instead of going into political science, maybe pursue a degree in renewable energy?
No, definitely. I think there's new frontiers on the spectrum of education and skills, and that will definitely lead more people into going after these skills and skills in
Yeah. You see, it's good that you mentioned Germany, because it's one of the countries in terms of economic development that I look at a lot. And one of the key features of the German economy, it's based on SMEs. Yes. And this fallacy of solving job creation through big projects, we must do away with it. The ability of SMEs, if we have proper SME development, it can solve the unemployment. The big projects, they are there, we need them. But if they are there, they should be linked to SME development. Consider one example. Maybe through a big project you can generate 1,000 jobs. But what if you have 1,000 SMEs?
Yeah.
How many jobs would you have created?
Yeah, of course.
And let's just look at a small SME. My wife is a medical doctor. So she's registered as CC, she runs it as a CC. But as a medical doctor, she employs a receptionist.
Yeah.
She employs a nurse. Somebody does the accounting for it. And because she's a medical doctor, we can afford a house, and we need somebody to tend to the house. We need a part-time gardener, part-time cleaner. So just through that, it's like 5 jobs that have been created. So I think if we follow the SME route, we can create more jobs.
Since independence, we've invested so much in SMEs. The Development Bank of Namibia has, put resources at the disposal of SMEs. We've seen a now failed SME bank. To a certain extent, it also invested quite widely into SMEs. Nampos, for instance, is another state institution that we can agree that has been trying to sort of formalize the financing of SMEs and the banking system for SMEs. With all of these investments and with all of these inputs, have we really gotten value for money back and seen the sustainable expansion of Namibian SMEs?
Unfortunately, there's been failure in SME, especially on the funding side and from the government side. Mm-hmm. And the SME development bank is really a classic case where there were loans given to people that were not even in essence vehicle loans or to people that could have gotten funding through the banking system. Mm-hmm. So we have to look at the governance side, but we also maybe have to look at how difficult it is as an SME to access funding. The Bank of Namibia and the Ministry of Finance just 2 days ago, they they said they will increase the SME funding again, coming from COVID. But what was surprising for me when I looked at it, that statistic, and I'm maybe not 100% correct through it, but I'm more or less having the correct figure that I've read. You see, a certain amount, say 100 million, was made available for SME funding during COVID. Out of that, they've allocated only 3.6 million.
Wow.
So if it was only 3.6 million,
The rest is still lying there.
then I'm asking myself why. So I then called one or two people that are SMEs, and one would say, we've put in our application, and it took like 6 months to be processed. By the time it was processed, the business is already closed. So we need to bring in more efficiencies.
Efficiency, yeah.
And obviously, we must not only focus on the funding of the SMEs, but we must also focus on the capacity and the mentoring and the coaching.
Yeah.
And maybe, and also look at the lessons from the failures of the past and how we can do better.
And financial services, I think that's an important part you mentioned. I mean, we also had some funding going through into one bank, and from the other bank already you lost like 8% just through transaction. And I mean, I feel like there's a lot of closeness within the Namibian system where, at least as a German, I'm fortunate that we have this giant European market where there's, at least inside the continent, a lot of competitiveness. And I was just wondering, because sometimes I feel like when I also see Chandre's house, the things he buys, it's predominantly always coming through maximum South Africa, or otherwise with extremely high shipping fees, maybe from outside of Africa. And is there maybe also more room to get all these better functioning fundings, or being it also inefficiencies that we have to tackle? Isn't there room also through more competitiveness within the African continent?
Yeah, there are two things that is important for me. Is when you speak, for example, of the South African chains, and we have so many South African chains. And for a long time, under Harambee, when we did Harambee, we actually engaged the South African chains and say we should at least have shelf space for the Namibian products.
Yeah.
And in horticulture, you start to see how produced in Namibia. But on other products, you don't see produced in Namibia.
Like made in Germany, we always have, in Deutschland.
Made in Germany. So we need also to support supply side constraints of SMEs. And we need, many of these suppliers, they also want a consistent supply.
Yeah.
You can now just come with 2 bottles of water today, and tomorrow there's no water. It's also an issue. So we need to really develop the supply side of the SMEs and also look at the quality of their standards. We have a standards institute that could come in. So I think there are a lot of development that needs to happen for us to be able to push the Namibian products first in the Namibian market before you even take it outside. But there have been some success stories that I've learned of Namibian products that are actually in Germany, charcoal.
Okay.
I believe it's even in Aldi, you can go to Aldi.
All right.
And you can get Namibian charcoal. We have cosmetics. Cosmetics, in fact, when the cosmetics thing started to come up, in Namibia we saw cosmetics, but when you want to export something to Germany, it's no longer cosmetic, it's pharmaceutical. So then you need a different standard. You can't just say, I've concocted something, I've not tested it properly, and now this thing goes and burns the skin of somebody. So there are a lot of business development and product development that has happened. And we must involve our Ministry of Trade and Industry. One good example now is, Chandra, I don't know if you've seen it. We have subscribed to the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, yes. And when I go to the supermarket shelves, I start to see products from the Middle East.
Yeah.
And I've not seen it before. Egyptian products, for example. So, because now we have a free trade agreement. So now the question is like, what products can we take to Egypt?
Yes.
We must not just do beef and beer. We must also now think of other products that we can take to Egypt and to Uganda and somewhere else. So it's the trade side is there, the trade facilitation is there, that we need to look also at.
And there's such a beautiful country. I mean, we drive through it, you see all the different aspects of geography, of different people, different ethnics, and a lot of different discussions also that we have on the side. If we now, I mean, we're speaking to a young audience, both in Germany and in Namibia. What would you maybe advise them to pursue in order to be part of that change? I mean, how can the large bulk of young people, how can they contribute? Is it maybe, I don't know, economic education? Is it, as you said, maybe also some form of entrepreneurial activity? How do we get these people to be involved? Because I'm not saying it's different in Germany. Also in Germany, we're living off a model that doesn't exist anymore, in the sense that we are living off the rentiers of an old economic model. You might know many of the SMEs are very old, but I feel like the young people don't really are as engaged into bringing this economic wealth, that inclusive wealth that we need. How would you, maybe also both of you, how would you address these young people?
Yeah, I would, my advice is, and I want to come back to this topic of manufacturing. Because Namibia, under Vision 2030, we have a target on manufacturing. People have asked the question, should we be a manufacturing nation? Mm-hmm. I believe that we must also look at the new jobs that are coming through the fourth industrial revolution. Mm-hmm. And that will give, and some of these jobs are jobs, they don't exist now. That means jobs that we can create. And when we go into those jobs, that requires creativity and that can cross borders. This is actually where we have more potential than if we want to go now into manufacturing firms or
which already exists somewhere else.
Exists somewhere else. So we have to anticipate what are those new jobs and new products that people want, and then prepare for it. The jobs of the future. What those jobs of the future is, I don't know. But one thing for certain is, I've seen Kenya and Botswana, they've used coding in the curriculum. Mm-hmm. And coding is going to be crucial to prepare kids for the future. In fact, I must say this, Chandra, you will be surprised. When I was statistician general, I learned that we were testing for literacy rate. So literacy rate in Namibia was 2 questions. Can you read and write? Yes or no? And now simplify it. And then we say, okay, so many people say they can read and write. In Japan, that time already, they didn't test any read and write. They tested if you can code.
As a form of literacy.
If you code, then you will see as a literate. So we have to latch on to these things, because now if we can do coding, and by going to automation, you can develop platforms, different types of platforms. Instead of selling a cup of a glass, you can actually sell your intellectual properties. That intellectual property can be on the Apple Store, it can be on the Google Store, and you make money through your intellectual property, and that can be developed right here.
Yeah.
Ja, Freunde, das war die Folge zur Ökonomie. Ich glaube, viele der Probleme, habe ich gemerkt, sind gar nicht so unterschiedlich zwischen Deutschland und Namibia. Inklusion, wirtschaftliche und auch gesundheitliche Bildung, Entrepreneurship und genauso auch die Zukunft mit Sachen wie Coding. Ich glaube, wir sind alle in einer großen Jugendbewegung und müssen gemeinsam an dieser Zukunft arbeiten. Dafür war die Folge für mich sehr aufschlussreich.
I think the 2 main words is inclusive development and people-centered development. That is really the synthesis of today's episode with Dr. Steytler. We really got to look at the of the Namibian economy, some of those barriers, but also some of the opportunities, especially for young people to get into. There's a new frontier coming to the economic relationship between Germany and Namibia. And I think now is the perfect time for young people to cash in, to make sure that we are able to take it forward. I'm Chandri. Continue watching, like and subscribe. Thank you.